We've been in a series called God is a Gardener that we just kicked off last week. And in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, beginning in verse 1, it says this. It says, "There is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the sun. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to tear down and a time to build. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. A time to scatter stones and a time to gather them. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to search and a time to give up. A time to keep and a time to throw away. A time to tear and a time to mend. A time to be silent and a time to speak. A time to love and a time to hate. A time for war and a time for peace." This morning, I want to preach a message called Dress for the Season. If you're taking notes, you can write that down this morning. Dress for the season. Amen. Amen. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Give it up for the worship team this morning. I don't know about you guys, but this is about the time of year, each and every year, that I start to just long for some sort of season change. Like, it has been hot long enough, it's been muggy long enough, and I start to really just want some sort of season change. And if there's one kind of like cruel reality about living in Florida, it's that right around this time that we really start to desire a change in the season, what we get is hurricane season. And that is not what any of us are looking for. Like, we're looking for maybe a little bit cooler weather, maybe a little bit more of a breeze, but sometimes we don't get the season that we want. Sometimes we don't get the season that we are hoping for. And I want to talk today about navigating the seasons of life, because if we're going to talk about this kind of idea of God as the gardener of our lives, then we have to be able to navigate the season that we are in appropriately. We have to be able to identify and navigate the season that we're in appropriately. A couple years ago, Kristen and I traveled up to Chicago for a wedding for a friend of ours, and we kind of turned it into a few-day trip. We went a couple days early, and we were really excited because it was in November, and we knew that it would be cold in Chicago in November, and we were ready to like experience the weather, experience the season changes up there. And we got up there, and sure enough, man, for us, it was cold. Like, it was what Florida would be like dead of winter cold. And we were loving it. It was beautiful weather, sun shining, but nice and cold. We were walking around the city, seeing all the sights, doing all the things that there are to do, and just enjoying our time there. But every single place that we went while we were there, we kept getting the same comment, which is people would ask us where we were from, and we'd say, "Oh, we're from Florida." And they would say, "Oh, did you bring this warm weather with you?" And we were like, "What are you talking about? This is not warm weather. This is cold weather. This is winter. This is like not warm weather." And they kept saying like, "Oh man, did you bring this warm weather with you?" And we went to a show one night, and they had everybody kind of do a show of hands for people that were out of town. And they said, "Man, we're so sorry for the unseasonably warm weather. We know you probably came to Chicago expecting it to be cold, and it's just not. It's warm." And we were like, "What is going on? Like, it is clearly cold outside. This is not warm weather." And so we went to the wedding, and on the morning of the wedding, we had to get there really early. And so we had to have pictures and photos and a rehearsal, and we did all these different things at the venue all day. So like, we were kind of inside all day this one day. And we went all the way through this early afternoon wedding, and we celebrated with the new bride and groom that evening. And then Kristen and I stepped outside for our last evening there in Chicago. We planned to walk to a place that we were going to eat dinner. And we were greeted with some of the coldest weather that I've ever experienced in my life. From one day to the next, the temperature had dropped nearly 30 degrees. A storm had come in off of the water, and so the wind was extremely just strong and piercing. It was unbelievably cold, and we thought we were gonna walk. Like, we thought we were gonna walk a few blocks to the restaurant. We made it like half a block before we ducked inside, called an Uber, and had it drive us to the restaurant. And it was amazing how just in the course of 24 hours, suddenly we were like completely unprepared for this change of season. Suddenly we were completely unprepared for this weather that just dropped in out of nowhere. Like, the same exact clothes, the same exact things that we had brought the day before were suddenly not appropriate for the season that we were in. Suddenly, the conditions that we were exposed to were uncomfortable and hard to manage. And how many of you know that sometimes life brings a season that we're not prepared for? Life brings a season that we're not ready for, that we were fine one day and then suddenly the next it feels like we're being exposed to conditions that are harsh and tough to manage. One day to the next, we find ourselves in a season that we did not expect, because the reality is this, that change is like baked into creation. This is what Solomon was talking about when he said there in the book of Ecclesiastes that there is a time and a season for everything, that everything changes, everything keeps moving, everything keeps going. And the reality is that it's not always that we're uncomfortable with change. It's not always that we don't like change. It's that we want a very specific kind of change. We want a very specific kind of change coming into our lives. But seasons were created by God. God created the seasons to come and go. God created the seasons to change. It says this in Genesis chapter 8, verse 22. It says, as long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night will never cease. In other words, the writer is telling us that seasons are like baked into this thing called life that we live, that God actually created seasons, that change always comes. But the hardest change for us to navigate, the most difficult change to navigate, is change that we resist or refuse to acknowledge. It's when we see change coming, but we resist it and refuse to acknowledge it. And see, I think so often, at least in my own life, the problem that I face is that I face seasons and I approach seasons as though they are problems to solve rather than rhythms that God has created in our lives. Like when we find ourselves in a season that isn't exactly what we expected, we view it as a problem that we have to solve. We view it as a puzzle that we have to solve rather than just recognizing the season that we are in. And so often what we want to do is we want to either rush through seasons into the next one, or we want to return to a season that we've been in. Like I have found in my own life that the most difficult season to live in is the season you are in right now. Like it is difficult to keep your feet planted. It's difficult to face the season that you are in right now. So often we long for whatever season is next. Like if I can just get through this season and into the next one, man, then my life will settle down. If I can just get through this season and into the next one, my problems will not follow me. We often want to rush into the next season, or we want to return to a season that we're particularly fond of in our lives. But we look back into a season that we loved and that we felt was fruitful. And it's like, man, if I could just get back to this one place. And I want to encourage you this morning, whatever season that you are in, that every season in our life has a purpose. That God works in every season of our life. God works in seasons that we are walking through that maybe we would rather not walk through. God works through circumstances that we would rather not face. God works through the brokenness and the pain of the world that we live in. We just have to be able to identify the season that we are in and recognize that every season has a purpose. So often what we do is we try to escape the season we are in rather than learning the lessons it's trying to teach us. We try to escape the season that we are in that actually serves a purpose in our lives. And so this is the question that I want us to ask ourselves today. And this is a good question for you to actually answer and actually give some thought to. And if you're married, to have a conversation with your spouse, and when you're around the table at dinner parties this Wednesday, to have a conversation with the people that God has placed in your life, is to answer this question: what season am I in? And take a moment to really ask yourself that question without kind of moving into the future and going, no, what season do I want to be in? And there's nothing wrong with looking for the future, and there's nothing wrong with having a vision for the future. But the best place to start is recognizing, hey, what season am I in right now? Not what season do I wish I was in, not which season do I want to return to, but what season am I in right now? Because as we dive into this concept of God as like the gardener of our lives, the key outcome is that God says that when we're planted in the house of God, that we flourish, that we grow, that we mature. And a good gardener knows that there is growth and there is maturity in every single season. That there is something for us in every single season, but we have to recognize the seasons of growth. And this is my main point for today, is that flourishing depends on recognizing the season, because seasons set our expectations, shape our growth, and reorder our priorities. Seasons, they set our expectations, they shape our growth, and they reorder our priorities. I think one of the most difficult things we can do, one of the hardest things we can do to make seasons hard on us, because the reality is this, like, I don't want to discount anybody's season of pain, anybody's season of suffering, any hard season that you may be walking through today or that you may have journeyed through in the past. The reality is that we do walk through seasons that are difficult. We do walk through seasons that bring us pain. We do walk through seasons that maybe it feels like we never quite understand why we walk through that season. I don't want to discount anybody's pain and just say like, hey, there's good in this season, so there's nothing bad in it. No, there are seasons of difficulty in our lives. We walk through difficult seasons in our lives. But I also believe this. I also believe that sometimes we make seasons more difficult than they have to be because we refuse to acknowledge the season that we're in. And so in the same way that like we're walking through Chicago completely underdressed and unready for the conditions that we're facing, when we don't recognize the season that we're in, often we experience the conditions of that season more harsh than we actually have to if we recognize the season in the first place. And so we have to begin from this place of just honestly recognizing and acknowledging and answering this question: what season am I in? And setting our expectations according to that season. Because unmet expectations in our lives are the breeding ground for discouragement. They're the breeding ground for unnecessary pain. They're the breeding ground for finding ourselves feeling as though we're falling behind in lives. We have to set our expectations for the season that we are in. So I want to talk about for a moment what it means to set our expectations based on our season. I love this moment in the book of Deuteronomy. The children of Israel have lived through extended seasons that are really, really difficult. Like an entire season of generations of slavery within their family line. God comes and he sets them free, but then they walk through a season of wilderness, which is not what they were expecting. God had promised them that he would take them into a land that would be their own, that he would be their God, that they would be his people, that they would flourish and they would grow in this land. And it took them much longer than they expected. That they found themselves pulled out of slavery and into a wilderness season. But there's this moment in the book of Deuteronomy where they're about to actually enter the promised land. Like this moment that they've been waiting for. And God speaks to them in this moment. And he says this in Deuteronomy chapter 11, verse 10. He says, the land you are entering to take over is not like the land of Egypt from which you came, where you planted your seed and irrigated it by foot as in a vegetable garden. But the land you are crossing the Jordan to take possession of is a land of mountains and valleys that drinks rain from heaven. It is a land that the Lord your God cares for. The eyes of the Lord your God are continually on it from the beginning of the year to its end. So if you faithfully obey the commands I'm giving you today, to love the Lord your God and to serve him with all your heart and with all your soul, then I will send rain on your land in its season, both autumn and spring rain, so that you may gather in your grain new wine and olive oil. I will provide the grass in the fields for your cattle, and you will eat and be satisfied. Notice a couple things in this moment. God is setting the expectation for the children of Israel what this new season in this new land is going to look like. And he lays it out clearly. He says, look, this is how it looked in the land of slavery. Like you toiled and you planted and you used your foot to plow the ground, but that's not how it's going to be in this next season. He actually sets the expectations, because if we don't set the expectations for the season that we are in, we will often carry into that season old mindsets and old rhythms and old patterns that do not serve us in the new season. And so what God is saying in this moment is, hey, listen, you think you know how to work the land. You think you know how to plow the ground. I'm telling you that this season is going to look different than the last season. And sometimes the most healthy thing we can do for our spiritual life and our mental health is just to acknowledge this season is going to look different from the last season. This season is going to require some different things than the last season. This season is going to require some different mindsets, some different habits in this season. And I love that he says, if you faithfully obey the commandments I am giving you today. He's speaking to the season that they are about to go in. And he's speaking about the season that they have just come out of. But notice the assignment he gives them. He says, focus on today. Like if you can just obey the commandments that I've given you today, I will bring you into this season that you're going into in this next season of your life. This season will not be like the last season. And even though we live in a state where we don't overly experience the change of seasons in the weather, we live in a city that experiences a change of season. In fact, just this week, I got an email from our newspaper, actually, that said, here's an article listing 10 restaurants that you want to try before season. And when I first moved to Sarasota, I knew that there was a season, but I didn't know exactly how it would affect my life until I actually lived through it. And by the way, that's a reality of life. Sometimes you find yourself disappointed because of the way you're responding to a season, but you've never faced that season before. And sometimes you actually have to go through a season so that when you face a similar season in the future, you know what to expect of it. And you know how to navigate it. And you know how to walk through it. But like we know what that article means. When it talks about trying these restaurants before season hits, we know that there are some places that you could roll up to today and get a table, but 3 or 4 months from now, you're gonna have to call ahead. We know that there are some places that take you like 10 or 15 minutes to get to, but when season hits in the city, that's gonna be doubled. It's gonna be 20 to 30 minutes, right? Like I live like 10 minutes from all of the things out at UTC, but can I tell you, like when the holidays and December and January and February roll around, suddenly what used to take me 10 minutes takes me like 20 to 30 minutes to go the same amount of time. But you know what I don't do in that season? I do not sit behind the wheel of my car and beat myself up. I do not sit behind the wheel of my car and go like, man, what is wrong with me? This is a 10-minute drive. Like I know how to get there. I know how to drive. What is wrong with me? No, I understand that it just takes longer in season. I understand that, hey, what does take me 10 minutes in one season takes me 20 to 30 minutes in another. We need to understand this in our lives. That there are some seasons of life that it just feels like it's taking longer. There are some seasons of life that it just feels like things are moving slower. What do I do in season here in Sarasota? I adjust my expectations based on the season. I don't leave my house and expect to get to UTC in 10 minutes. I don't go to certain restaurants and expect to be able to walk right in. I understand that the season actually requires something different. We have to learn to adjust our expectations based on the season of our life. And this is really, really difficult in the culture that we live in, because culture wants us to believe that we can have everything in every season. In fact, culture wants us to believe that we are entitled to everything in every season, that we deserve everything in every season, that if you are not getting everything in every season, you are missing out. If you are not getting everything out of every season, you need to figure out a way to optimize and do better, because you should be getting everything in every season of life. But we understand that that is not the case. There are things that you can do when you have a teenager that you cannot do when you have a newborn. There are things that you can do when you are out of school for the summer that you cannot do when you are back in school for the summer. We as parents, we entered about a year ago this new phase where like our oldest daughter is old enough to actually stay home and babysit the other two children. It's absolutely glorious most of the time. But we would not leave them home when they were 6 months old. Like when she was 1 year old, we would not just leave her home with her little sister and say, hey, like we're gonna be back in a couple, tempting sometimes. But we would never do that because we understand that's not the season that we are in. And man, I just want to encourage you, like, you're going to enjoy and get more fulfillment out of your life if you adjust your expectations based on the season you're in. And this is not about expecting less of God. This is not about expecting that he can't do more with your life. This is just learning to be content with what he's doing in your life right now. What he's doing in your life today, because we were not meant to have everything in season. But so often what we do in different seasons of our lives is we slip into comparison where we're comparing our season to someone else's season. We're comparing where we're at to where someone else is at. And we're frustrated because we're comparing our winter season with someone else's summer season. Like it seems like someone else is having all the fun, someone else is bearing all the fruit, and we're just in some kind of hard season that but what we don't know is we don't know how long ago they planted to actually bear the fruit that we're seeing in their life. We don't know how long they toiled. We don't know what they learned through the seasons. We don't know how long they waited. We don't know how long they persevered. We don't know the struggles that we walked through, but so often we compare, and it leads us to one of the biggest struggles of our day, which is discontentment. And I know for a fact that there are some areas of your life where you're discontent. And I know that because there are some areas of my life where I am discontent. And there are some areas of my life where I see what other people are doing and what other people are saying and what other people are experiencing. And I find that thing creeping up in my life of like, man, God, why not me? Why not this season? And that's why I love what the Apostle Paul says when he says, I have found the secret to contentment in every season. The Apostle Paul says, man, I've walked through seasons of pain, imprisonment. I've walked through seasons of discouragement and hardship, but I have found the secret to contentment. And he says this, he says, I have learned what it means to be content. He doesn't say like, I know, I knew, I grew up knowing. It was inherent within me that I knew how to be content. He says, I learned how to be content. And often what the season we're walking through is teaching us is how to be content. Is how to actually be content with what he's given us in this season. How to be content with what we have in this season. I have learned to be content. Those verses come right before some of our favorite verses. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. What Paul is telling us in that moment, what he's trying to convey to us is, listen, I've found the secret to being content in every single circumstance, and it's not looking to my circumstance to be content. It's leaning on the strength of Christ that actually brings contentment into my life. It's leaning on the strength of God that actually brings contentment in my life. It's trusting the hand of God in a season that feels like lack or in a season that feels like suffering that actually brings contentment into my life. So often we search for contentment in the fruit of our season rather than God. Like, listen, God calls us to bear fruit, but our contentment is not to be rooted in the fruit that we're bearing. Our contentment is to be rooted in him. Our contentment is to be rooted in the fact that we are connected to him. That we have access to him. That God, if my life actually doesn't bear any fruit, and if you don't do anything else for me, I'm content in what you've already done. I'm content in what you've already provided for my life. And discouragement is dangerous because, man, when we start to compare and we get discouraged, discouragement causes us to quit too soon. Discouragement causes us to tap out on marriages, relationships, jobs, the church, relationships within the church. It often leads us to disconnect too soon, to tap out too soon. And I love that in verse 11, as they're about to enter into the promised land, I love that God says, but the land you are crossing the Jordan to take possession of is a land of mountains and valleys that drinks rain from heaven. I love that he sets their expectation and says, hey, guess what? Even in the promised land, there's still valleys. It's not all mountaintops in the valley. And the danger of comparing our season to someone else's season is we only see their mountaintops. Can I just level the playing field a little bit and let you know there is no season of life that does not have its valleys. There is no season of life that does not have that occasional tinge of pain or disappointment. We love to broadcast our mountaintops. We love to share our mountaintops. We love to see each other's mountaintops. But the reality is there are even valleys in the promised land. But notice what he says. He says the rain falls on the mountaintops and the valleys. Now listen, even when you get into the valley, don't try to provide from your own hand. Even when you get into the valley, don't try to strive on your own to make something grow or to get back to the mountaintop. Listen, the rain falls on the mountains and the valleys. And that's good news for all of us in this room today, because some of us are right now walking through a valley. If you're not, I'm not trying to burst your bubble. You will walk through a valley. You will find days where it feels like you are walking through a valley. And I love that God says, hey, listen, you can still be in the promised land and in a valley. You can still be in the promised land and walking through some uncertainty, but guess what? The rain, the provision, the abundance of God falls on the mountaintops and the valleys. His goodness is not dependent on whether I feel like I'm on a mountaintop or in a valley. His faithfulness is not dependent on whether or not I feel like I'm on a mountaintop or a valley. His goodness and his faithfulness to us is in every season of our lives. And God in his kindness sets their expectations for what the next season is going to look like. And for some of us, even as we naturally go into this next season of life where we may not feel it in the weather, but we might feel it in our schedules or in our finances or in our families, as we enter into the next season, it would do us a lot of good to just set some expectations for what this season is in our lives, so that we can actually enjoy and get fulfillment in the season that God has us in without robbing it of its significance by only striving for the future or reaching for the past. Because so often we want to rush through or reach back into another season rather than living right in the moment that we are in. We have to set expectations for the season. And secondly, we have to look for growth. And we have to look for growth in the right places. Like the question I would ask in this moment is to say, like, what is God doing in this season? Now that I've identified what season I'm in, what is God doing in this season right now? Because we have to recognize that every single season is actually important for growth and maturity. Every single season has a purpose toward growth and maturity. And the reality is this: if we look for growth in the wrong places, we'll be disappointed by what's happening in our lives. Like during the fall and winter months, sometimes you might look at a plant and you might think, man, that thing is not bearing fruit. But the reality is, in the fall season, when a plant is dropping leaves, and getting brown on the outside, that's actually not a sign that the plant is dying. That's an appropriate response to the season it's in. Because what it's actually doing is it's actually storing energy so that its roots can go deep, so that in the season where it's designed to bear fruit, it can actually handle the fruit it's meant to bear. And so even in the winter months, even in the months that it seems like nothing is happening, things are happening below the surface. Sometimes we have to look below the surface at what God is doing in our hearts, in our minds, and our souls to see the growth that he's actually doing. See, we're called as disciples of Jesus to bear fruit. But don't mistake lack of fruit in one season of your life for failure. Because the process of bearing fruit actually requires us to also put down and nourish roots. It requires us to also grow deep. And maybe in the season where it looks like you're not bearing any external fruit, maybe God is doing an internal work to prepare you for the season that you'll bear the fruit he's called you to bear. Maybe God is doing an internal work, allowing your roots to go deep. It's part of the process. In Galatians chapter 6, the Apostle Paul says, let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. If we do not tap out too soon. If we do not uproot too soon, we will reap a harvest in the proper season. But if you don't know what season that you are in, you'll find yourself discouraged with the perceived lack of growth in your life. Listen, I am like a growth guy. I love to see people grow. I love to challenge people to grow. I love to try to help people grow. But the reality is that growth is not always as visible as we want it to be. In fact, I would say it this way: growth is not always visible and it's not always comfortable. Like sometimes the growth that we're experiencing is beneath the surface. Sometimes the growth that we are experiencing is actually being brought forth in our life through pain and through some things that we have to persevere through, that God is actually forming our character in those things. God does not waste a season of your life. God does not cause everything in your life, but he does not waste a season of your life. God will use the circumstances of your life to shape your character, to become more like him. And we miss out on the growth that is available to us in seasons if we try to rush the process. We miss out on the growth that's available to us in seasons if we try to escape the season. We have to recognize, acknowledge, name the season that we are living in. And we have to look for growth in the right places so that we're not discouraged. And then finally, we have to reorder our priorities. Different seasons require different things of us. Different seasons require a different arrangements of priorities in our lives. Proverbs chapter 20 says it this way. It says, the sluggard does not plow in autumn. He will seek at harvest and have nothing. He does not plow when he's supposed to. And so at harvest time, he does not have what he expected to have. There are some seasons where we are meant to be plowing and planting seed. And the reality is sometimes we'll get to a season of our lives where we're expecting to bear fruit, but we haven't planted any seed. We're expecting to bear fruit, but we haven't actually planted any seed. And seasons are God's way of setting your priorities right. Seasons are God's way of helping you to order your priorities in your life. Some things matter more and require more of our attention in certain seasons of our lives. I remember when I was in college, every single semester, at the beginning of the semester, I had to go and see my advisor. And it was my advisor's job to assess everything that was required of me to get the degree that I had declared, and to make sure that I did it in the right order so that I could be in school for like the shortest amount of time possible. And so what that meant is that sometimes my advisor would tell me that I had to take classes in a season that I really did not want to take that class. He would tell me that I had to take a certain class because he'd be like, hey, listen, if you don't take part one of this class now, you can't take it in the spring. So you're gonna have to wait all the way until next year to actually take that class again. And it's gonna actually extend the time that you're here. And sometimes when we find ourselves in life and we keep coming up against the same problems, we keep coming up against the same issues, sometimes it's because we have refused to learn the lessons in the season we were meant to learn them. Sometimes it's because we've refused the growth that God has for us in a season. And can I just tell you this? God is more patient than you. God will not put you in a season when you have not learned the lesson you need to sustain that season. And so sometimes, man, we feel like we're just like, keep coming up against a wall and coming up against some, resistance in our walk with the Lord. Sometimes it's just that we keep refusing to learn the lessons that he has for us in this season. Man, I had friends who they would come up and they'd just be like, man, I am not taking that class in this season. I'm loading up on electives. Like I am front loading. I'm having a good time. Can I tell you something? It always catches up with you. it always extends the time that you're actually supposed to be there. Like I have friends who, man, we came in at the same time and they were in school like 2-3 years past me. Not because I was smarter, I might have been, but not because I was smarter. But because let me tell you something, every time I sat down in my advisor's office, whatever he told me I had to do, I did it whether I wanted to or not. Like whether it was what I was feeling that fall or not, whether I was feeling that class that fall or that spring or not, I took it because he said, hey, listen, in order to get where you're supposed to go, this is what you have to do in this season. And God is a gardener who is kind, who he wants to get you to bear fruit in your life. He wants your life to bear fruit more than you want your life to bear fruit. He wants significance in your life more than you want significance in your life. He wants flourishing more than you want flourishing in your life. But so often, man, we want the fruit, but we don't want to receive the growth that is in this season of our life. And I want to encourage you this morning, if you're walking through a season that you don't understand, if you're walking through a season that you're having a hard time processing, I am not discounting the pain of your season, but I am encouraging you, take a step back and say, God, what can I learn in this season? God, what can I grow in this season? I don't want to go through another season like this and learn these same lessons. I want to go through another season like this stronger and more prepared and more rooted and less likely to be uprooted because I have come through and I have listened and I have obeyed what you say today. There is purpose in every season of your life. He does not waste a season. And I love what it says in the book of Malachi, chapter 3. God says, I, the Lord, do not change. I, the Lord, do not change. The book of Hebrews says Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever. What does that mean? When seasons change, he does not change. That's why when seasons change, we can trust and rely and hold on to him regardless of the season. You know where we get into trouble? Is we try to go through seasons and we try to be the ones to not change. We try to be the ones to not change with the season. When we try to not change with the season, we take on God's role and God's responsibility. And you can't bear that responsibility. You can't bear that role. Seasons will bring change in your life. They will bring growth in your life. And what is the key? It's like the Apostle Paul said, I have found the key to contentment in every season. My strength doesn't rely in my season. My strength doesn't rely in what's in front of me. My strength doesn't rely in my external circumstances. My strength relies on the unchanging God who created me, the unchanging God who knows my season, the unchanging God who brings growth and flourishing in every season if we only step back and acknowledge it. And I want to encourage some people in this room this morning that your season is not wasted. There is growth. There is maturity in your season. Maybe for some of you, you just need to reset your expectations for the season. Like maybe some of you just need to step back and say, man, I'm going to acknowledge the season that I am in. I'm just going to set some new expectations for what God has for me in this season. Some of you need to step back and recognize the growth that's happening. You've just been looking for it in the wrong place. And some of you have some priorities that you need to reorder based on the season that you are in. For all of us, we need to lean on the strength of God in every single season that we have. And for some of you, you've never entered into a relationship with him. You've never said yes to him. You've never trusted him with your life. Can I encourage you, whatever kind of season you're in, the best thing you could do today is say yes to him. The best thing you could do today is say, I'm going to trust you with my life. So in just a moment, we're going to pray a prayer together. And if you've never given your life to Jesus, or maybe at some point you did and you know you need to surrender your life to him again, you need to fully live your life for him. I want you, as we pray this prayer out loud, to pray it from your heart, because the Bible tells us if we believe in our mouth and confess with our heart that he is faithful, to give us the gift of salvation. So would you bow your heads and close your eyes with me this morning? And as we pray this out loud, if that's you, just pray this from your heart. Say, Jesus, I give you my life. I acknowledge that I'm a sinner in need of a Savior. And you are that Savior. Come on, right now, you prayed that prayer. Every head's bowed, every eye is closed. You know you need to surrender your life to him. Would you just lift your hand so that I can pray for you? I surrendered my life to Jesus today. I see you three right here. Anybody else? I see you over here. Anybody else? I see you back there. I see you over here. I see both of you right there. Anybody else? Come on, Harvard. Can we stand to our feet this morning? Can we celebrate those that just said yes to Jesus? Come on, can we celebrate this morning?